Welcome, guys, to Meek Brothers Entertainment. I'm one of your hosts, Blake Meek. I'm here with my brother, Vance. With the NFL draft just about 22 ish hours away now at this point, um, we figured now's as good a time as any to get a last minute mock draft out of the way, kind of what we think is going to happen combined with what probably should happen. And then when we watch the draft tomorrow, it will be completely wrong. And we will get no picks correct. But that's as is the life of an NFL draft analyst. We are going to do just the first round tonight, alternating picks. I'm going to start out at one. So I'll do all the odds. Vance will do all the evens. And we'll just kind of see how it goes. How are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Ate dinner. I am ready to go. I've got the kids in bed. Got my information pulled up that I need to screw this up completely.
Yep.
So we should be fun.
As far as drafts go, at least for the last several years, this is about as unpredictable as a draft as I can think of.
It really is. Usually at least the first pick or the first few picks are pretty well known. Like we knew it was going to be Joe Burrow, Chase Young, a few years ago. We knew maybe not necessarily the order, but who the top few picks were going to be even last year. Like we knew it was going to be Jamar Chase going early and some of those other guys. Penei Sewell was going to be a top 10. Like we knew the names and who they're not necessarily the order, but there wasn't always a ton of drama inside the top 5 and even top 10 sometimes. But this year, it feels like anything could literally happen. There could be legitimately 4 or 5. You could argue for 5 different guys at the very least, if not more than that, for the overall pick.
Last year you were looking at there were probably 6 or 7 guys that you thought might go top 5. There's about 12 this year that if they went top 5, I'd be like, okay.
It's really as much of a crapshoot this year as it's ever been, at least in recent memory for me.
And to start it off, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock. I know what I think they should do. It's not what I think they're going to do. My opinion, Kayvon Thibodeau is the best player in the draft. Jacksonville needs an edge. That's who I would pick. However, I do not think that's where they're going to go. I think ultimately they're going to go with Trayvon Walker, edge from Georgia. I get it to a degree. He's athletic. He can do all kinds of things. But I'm not necessarily sold that he is elite at anything. Reminds me quite a bit of Rashawn Gary a few years ago. This guy who seemed to be more athletic and more than he was at Michigan. And I don't see number 1 overall pick in Trayvon Walker.
Well, and that's kind of where things are with some of these edge guys in recent memory. You're gambling on the tool. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Rashawn Gary seems to have worked out. Last year, I was very much against the kid from Penn State whose name I always mispronounce. I'm not going to try.
Odafe.
Yeah. So, and that seems to, at least so far, based on limited viewing, seems to have worked out also. So, that's going to lead to teams gambling on athleticism, gambling on tools rather than on production or on, some of the more old school ways of judging edge players. So I think that's probably playing into Walker's favor. Maybe if those guys hadn't worked out so well, then maybe teams view things a little differently and they go for more of the classic edge rusher look. And then you're talking about Thibodeau, who you mentioned, or even maybe a Karlaftis or something, who are more traditionally built like edge players. But with the success of the other guys, I think that has led to more teams willing to take chances on athleticism and the raw ability, and just turn them loose and see what they can do.
And gambling on edges that are elite athletes is a story as old as time. It happens every year. It's happened every year for years and years. Guys like Aaron Maben, guys like Golston from Ohio State, if you want to even go back that far.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you don't. I just think there are better edges who are elite athletes, just maybe not quite Trayvon Walker, that
Right.
would be better off being the number one overall pick.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Thibodeau is the best player on the draft. He's number one player on my board. So if I were making the pick, it would be Thibodeau instead. I think that he brings as much athleticism as Walker does. Like, it's not like we're talking about some big giant stiff edge player. Thibodeau certainly has plenty of speed and power and things that that you look for. But Walker may have a little bit of an edge in terms of a little bit better technique, a little bit better hands, maybe. So I can see why they're leaning that way. And of course, he played for Georgia, whose defense literally owned all of college football this year. It was ridiculous. But I would pick Thibodeau, but I can certainly see Walker has kind of risen up boards, and I can see why I don't have him as my number one overall edge, but he or even number two for that matter. I think he might be 3 on my board. I forget where I ended up ranking them, but yeah, I think Thibodeau would be my pick. But we'll move on to the Detroit Lions, who hold the number 2 pick in the draft. And again, this is probably going to be a pick that wouldn't be necessarily what I would do, because I think if I was Detroit, I would have talked myself into taking the quarterback and going with Malik Willis. But I have a suspicion that they're going to go with an edge rusher, which is not a bad idea in this class. There's some really great edge rushers. And again, it's not the edge rusher that I would pick, even because, again, Thibodeau is my number 1. He's still on the board. That's who I would take. But I have a feeling that with Aiden Hutchinson, there are kind of conflicting reports. You've heard that the media is higher on him than the NFL may be, but then again, some of the draft analysts who have more of a handle on what the NFL likes still have him as their number 1 overall pick, which kind of leads me to believe that maybe they have some information, maybe they've heard some rumblings. So I think that Detroit is going to go with Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. You have also, I guess, would be a nice ticket draw as well. I don't know if that would factor in, but local college kid, would also play well there. I like Hutchinson. I don't like him as much as Thibodeau, and I think I also had. I think I might have had Walker over Hutchinson. Maybe that was where I had him. Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I think that that the league's going to value him. He does have a high motor. He plays hard. He's quick. He's got good tools. He has shorter than ideal arms for those who kind of buy into that kind of thing. He also benefited from playing on a pretty good defensive line with another top, had he not got hurt anyway, another top 15, top 20 pick on the other side of that defensive line, which may have benefited him some. So we'll see. But I think he's going to go higher than I necessarily would take him, but not by a lot. Like I still have him as top 10 guy.
He's not my edge too. Well, I think he is my edge 4, maybe. I like Thibodeau's 1. I actually like Ojabo better as just a pure pass rusher. Now Hutchinson's
you can make that argument for sure.
Hutchinson's going to be better against the run. He's going to be more of an all-around defensive end, but I think Ojabo can come in and give you that kind of what Brian Burns did for Carolina his first year, which he's not now because he tore the Achilles. But I don't think this is an egregiously bad pick by any means. Hutchinson's talented. He's a top 10 guy. I think it's a little early for my liking, but he definitely fits what Dan Campbell likes.
Sure, yeah, that matters.
That high motor, hardworking kind of guy. And I think that there's a real good chance that he ends up in Detroit. And then moving on. Now, this is where things get a little tricky for me. The Texans need everything.
Yeah.
There's no pick that, or no position you could look at and go, you know what? They're really just set there. I think they give Davis Mills another chance. I don't think they go quarterback this year.
Yeah.
He played well enough to earn himself a year where maybe you, I don't know, build something around him. That team's terrible. The rumblings out of everything that I'm hearing is that they are going to go cornerback. And I'm going to give them my personal cornerback one and give them Derek Stingley.
Stingley is also my top cornerback. I think it's easy, and certainly you can talk about the injuries that he's gone through and the amount of playing time that he has, or in his case, has not gotten over the past few years. And obviously the production is not there either, partly due to injuries and not playing. But you're talking about a guy who a few years ago was far and away, as a freshman, the best back in the country. And he didn't just, he didn't forget how to play cornerback. He's still that guy. He's had maybe not the most ideal couple of years, but like there's no reason to think that he can't, once he's healthy, and I assume that he is now, be what he was just a couple of years ago when people just couldn't get enough of watching him play. He was maybe one of the 2 or 3 more popular players in the country. People just wanted to watch the LSU play just to watch Stingley play cornerback. He was that good.
He has to stay healthy. That's one big thing. I look at the 2020 COVID season, and you don't throw it out, but you have to look at it through a different lens than you do the other seasons. Everything was it was just a weird situation that nobody was prepared for. And then honestly, I think that most of that LSU team checked out last year. Now you can take that as a knock on him if you want, or however you want to take it. But I think they kind of just checked out.
Easy to do because at that point they had lost obviously a lot of star power. They weren't very good. They were losing almost weekly, it seemed like. So I can see, again, you can knock a guy for certainly saying that he didn't give his max effort, but if you're in that position, it's easy to not even purposely not give max effort. You can see how somebody would be more apt to protect themselves rather than give it all for a team who's going to win 5-6 games.
And at the end of the day, I love Sauce Gardner. I think he is fantastic. If they took him here, you wouldn't hear me argue. But I think Stingley has the highest upside as a cornerback, and maybe the highest upside in the draft. He may be, in 5 years, the best player out of this draft.
Certainly very possible.
And
the 4th pick is held by the New York Jets. Excuse me. And, there's a lot of talk about tackle here. They also have needs at receiver, edge rusher. They're cornerback. They could go some different ways here as well. But I think that, and even amongst the edge rushers, I know there's been some talk about Jermaine Johnson, who actually earlier when I was talking about my top guys, Jermaine Johnson was the one that I forgot. He is my actual edge 2. And then Trayvon Walker's 3, Hutchinson 4. So there's some talk about Johnson going here, and I can see that. But I think in the end that the tools of Thibodeau will win out. And so for the 4th pick, I'm going to go ahead and go with Thibodeau here. I think that stops his perceived fall that some people have saying he may drop out of the top 10 or at least to 8 or 9 or something in that range. But I think there's a good chance that he goes here to the Jets. They're just going to realize that his tools are just too much to pass on.
Yeah, the Jets need edge rushers. Everybody thought they got one last year when they signed Carl Lawson. Fortunately, he ended up getting hurt, missing the season. But if he comes back healthy and you put him on one side and Thibodeau on the other, that's nasty. I mean,
a team traditionally that relies on their defense. When they were good, they were led by the defense with producing a lot of sacks, and then having guys like Darrelle Revis and some of those guys they've had in the secondary, good linebackers. So they are a team that wants to play defense. And so it makes a lot of sense to add an extra pass rusher if you can get another guy with a ceiling of 12, 15 sacks a year to go along with Lawson, who, if he can stay healthy, is another guy who can produce 12, 15 sacks a year. Then you've got a good start on that defense.
And you've got Quinnen Williams.
Exactly.
So I mean, this would give them a really, really good pass rushing trio, and take some pressure off of Zach Wilson in that offense because they need it. So
for sure.
Up next, we have the Giants, and there are several different directions I think the Giants could go. They need a lot too. They could use an edge rusher, which I don't know if they end up going one here. They need offensive linemen, which is where I think they ultimately end up going. And I think they end up taking Evan Neal here, tackle from Bama.
Yeah, I think that's a good value. Neal is I know there's a lot of talk about the kid from NC State in the top tackle, but for my money, Neal's still the top guy, and by a decent enough margin that I don't even really consider, if it was me anyway, Ekwonu here. It's Neal or a different position.
This gives you Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal as your left and right tackles.
And Thomas came along. Thomas was the guy that I had as my number one tackle a few years ago, and he struggled to start his career, but
he played really well last year.
Figured things out a little bit. He played pretty well last year. Neal's another guy. He's just he's huge, and he's had weight problems in the past, so that's going to be key. He's got to keep his weight where it is now at most. But if he does, and he can maintain that weight, then he's got really good footwork for a guy his size. The things that he's rusty at can be taught. It's not that that he just can't learn those things.
Right.
So I think he's got an ability to be better than he is now. And as of now, he's my tackle number one for this class.
And he's another one of the guys that worst case scenario, he's played guard before. He can play guard.
Yeah,
he can. If you decide you need to slide him inside, you can do that. So he gives you some versatility on that offensive line. I know they've got, I want to say Matt Pert, they took in the third round a couple years ago, that played well at right tackle when he was able to play and stay healthy. So it does give you some options up front. You can switch things around. And if you're going to stick with Daniel Jones, which I think is a horrible mistake, but if you are,
I think they are this year anyway.
I've read rumors where they said they're going to sit down and decide whether they're going to pick up his fifth-year option or not.
Yeah.
But if you're going to stick with him, you have to protect him up front, and Neal would go a long way in that.
Next up is the Carolina Panthers, and obviously quarterback is the talked about need there. Obviously they can use some offensive linemen as well, and there's a couple of decent options available in Ekwonu and also Charles Cross, who have really high on the board. And then even if they wanted an inside guy or a versatile guy, Kenyon Green is somebody that I really, really like out of this class. But in this case, Malik Willis is quarterback one on my board by quite a bit, and he's sitting there available for them. And so it's a fairly easy pick for me. I think that's what they'll do if he's there. They could surprise me because obviously anything can happen in this draft. But for me, I just can't see them passing on the talent that Willis has to help transform that offense within maybe it may take a year. He has some time that he's going to need to learn and get a little better and develop the tools that he has, because his tools are tremendous. But a year or two from now, he could be. He has the ability to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah. If you're going to take a quarterback, bet on traits. He has elite traits that can, if they can get him to his potential, he has traits to be a top 10 quarterback in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, do they? Do you think Matt Rule can do it? Now, that's a question for another
Well,
day.
that's a whole other discussion.
But they've got Sam Darnold. No matter what you think of Sam Darnold, he gives you the ability to sit Malik Willis for a year if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
You can throw Sam Darnold out there. But I agree. Malik Willis is quarterback one by a pretty decent margin.
Yeah.
And if I'm taking a quarterback top 10, then they have to have some sort of elite trait that I can look at and go, that's something that they can do that very few people can do. And his athleticism and arm give him that.
Right.
Back to the New York Giants at number 7. The Giants are in kind of a weird spot for me here. The top 3 edge rushers, 3 of the top 4 edge rushers are off the board. They could use the edge, but I don't know that I know you're a little bit higher on Jermaine Johnson than I am. I don't know that I love him at 7. I think that if you're trying to figure out if Daniel Jones is the guy, you've got to give him the best chance that you can. Kadarius Toney is already requesting a trade.
Reportedly, yeah.
Now, whether they trade him or not, I don't know. I wasn't very high on Kadarius Toney anyways.
No.
But I think that they are going to take my wide receiver 1. I know there's a lot of talk with wide receiver 1s in this draft. Nobody seems to have the same person. But for my money, I think Garrett Wilson is wide receiver 1. And I'm going to give him to the Giants here. He gives Daniel Jones somebody he can depend on, somebody who can get open, somebody who after the catch can make plays. And I think he will help them open that offense up.
The 8th pick belongs to the Falcons, and I think that if Malik Willis was available, I think he's the pick. They still could pick a quarterback. Now, we know from past experience that quarterbacks will go higher than they oftentimes should just because of positional value. We not that long ago had a draft where guys like Christian Ponder and Jake Walker and Blaine Gabbert were all pretty high picks because teams wanted quarterbacks, needed quarterbacks, and so they were willing to reach for quarterbacks. And so I think you could see one of the quarterbacks go here, but I just have a feeling that they're going to talk themselves into holding out and waiting until next year on a quarterback. And I think here they go after the edge rusher, which the highest one on my board, of course, and probably on most boards at this point is Jermaine Johnson. And so I go with Johnson. He's a guy that I just like the way that he attacks opposing offensive linemen. He comes with just I keep going back to the word violence with his hands. When he comes with hands first, he is just attacking full on with everything he's got. The lineman on the other side of him. And so I think that he's the pick here. He's got a good, nice upside. Now he's a little bit older. I think he's 24.
I think so.
With, maybe a little bit of a knock on him, but I think that his raw skills that he possesses are good enough that you go ahead and take that shot at number 8.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad pick at all. The Falcons are another team that's just honestly not very good. They're clearly moving into a rebuild after trading Matt Ryan. I know they say that they're not rebuilding, but they are. That team has not got a ton of talent, but Jermaine Johnson does give you a guy there with Grady Jarrett on that offensive or that defensive line that can cause some havoc in the backfield. The 9th pick, the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is a place, again, if Malik Willis was there, they take him.
Yeah.
I don't think there's another quarterback. There's probably another quarterback that ends up going top 10. There's not another one I would take top 10.
Yeah.
I think this is where, if you want to call it a slide, it ends. And this is where Seattle takes Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati. They're another team that's not got a ton of talent. We're used to seeing Seattle, in the playoffs. This team, they traded Russell Wilson. Their offensive lines, meh. Their defense has gotten older. They've moved on from a lot of guys. But Gardner brings in cornerback one, shut down talent. Like I said, if he goes third to the Houston Texans, I would not be upset with that at all. And this is both a best player available and a need fit for Seattle.
The Jets are back on the clock at number 10. And this is actually an interesting pick because there are a few different guys that I think are really, really solid options. The Jets tackle situation is interesting because they have a guy in Mekhi Becton who looked like he was going to be a fantastic pro, and then has had some injury issues and maybe some issues with his weight, or there are some questions at least around the tackle position. It's not as solid as you would think it would be with Fant played well last year and Becton coming back. So I think that the guy like Ekwonu could be an option here. I think Ekwonu also can play guard, so I think that's key for them. And I think he may be better guard than he is tackle based on my grade. They also need a receiver here. It could be a good spot for Drake London to give them a bigger target to pair with Elijah Moore, who they picked last year. And then Kyle Hamilton, safety, has slid down the board and is a guy that can fit in any defense and automatically make it better. So I really have a hard time deciding for sure which guy that I want, but I think that the smart money here for the Jets with a young quarterback in Zach Wilson, who at times struggled last year, needs some stability. I think the pick is Ekwonu, and you play him at tackle if you need him to play tackle. If not, then you slide him inside, let him play guard, and he's going to make your guard position better. I just think that they need to give Zach Wilson every chance to succeed. And I think the receiver class is deep enough that they can still get some quality receivers. Or at this point, maybe they can trade for an A.J. Brown or Deebo Samuel, somebody who are apparently unhappy with where they're at. But I think that getting a premium tackle is, or at least offensive lineman, is more important than maybe reaching a little for a receiver.
And that makes sense. Ekwonu gives you plenty of versatility on that line. You can move him to probably anywhere besides center. Yeah. I think he would be okay playing. That makes sense. I like that pick. With Washington, I am, in fact, pleased that you did not take Drake London because I think that is where Washington goes. I think they go receiver. I think if you had taken London, they may have went for another one, but I think London would fit very well opposite of Terry McLaurin. Gives them two different kinds of receivers, and they seem sold on Carson Wentz.
I've mocked London to the Commanders previously.
Yeah,
another progress.
They seem sold on Carson Wentz, which I don't know. It's the third team in a row that seems sold on him. I don't. It is what it is. But
they're with him this year, and then see what happens.
But I think London gives them a big-bodied receiver who can go up. He can get the ball. He's going to win those 50-50 balls. And he's more athletic than he gets credit for. He's almost getting a little bit of the T. Higgins slower and can't separate kind of treatment this year. I don't think he's going to fall anywhere near as far as Higgins does.
Right.
But he's a guy who I think is going to get overlooked for some of these other guys, but he's a super talented guy.
Yeah, and we talked about that before when we were talking about the defensive linemen and the edge rushers, as far as maybe with the success of some of these other guys, maybe allows teams to be more open to drafting guys who are, based on their tools rather than production and things like that. And I think that there's a decent enough chance that the success of a T. Higgins in particular, and on a big stage last year, obviously, as the Bengals managed all the way to the Super Bowl, and he had a huge play in the Super Bowl at that. So I think that maybe that kind of a spotlight on a taller guy, maybe not a speed, obviously not as fast, more possession type receiver, maybe could help a guy like Drake London. Who's obviously very talented in his own right. I don't make it seem like he's not. But I think that maybe that could play in his favor at least a little bit. The 12th pick, rather, is the Minnesota Vikings, who certainly would like to improve on last year.
Yeah.
The Vikings are a team that I think if Sauce Gardner hadn't gone, I think he's probably a fairly easy pick. For them, because they've got, I believe they re-signed Patrick Peterson, but obviously he's an older player at this point, and then they've got some sort of questions around that.
Yeah,
but obviously he's off the board. I don't know that they would reach. It'd be a little bit of a reach. I really do like the kid from Clemson, Andrew Booth.
Yeah.
But I think it may be slightly early for him here. I think that this one's one of the harder ones for me because they really would have liked to have had Sauce Gardner fall to them.
Oh yeah.
And early for some of their other needs, so they don't really necessarily match up with the board real well. But I think here in this case, the Vikings are going to go ahead and go with a maybe a Memphis prize, but I'm going to give them Jordan Davis from Georgia, big, huge defensive lineman, playing a division that is obviously a lot of cold weather games, a lot of attempts to run the football, and I think he obviously is a humongous monster, a human being, moves better than he has any right to. And so I think they could look maybe to the success of a guy like Vita Vea from Tampa Bay, who people said a few years back should fall down boards more because he can't rush the passer as well. But I think he brings so much value at stopping the run, and then a little bit of juice in the pass rush game, enough that he has first round value.
I agree. I think actually Vea went 12th to Tampa Bay as well. So that's some good symmetry there. But if you put Jordan Davis in the middle with Daniel Hunter on the outside, and especially if you put them on the same side, that's scary. You got to double team somehow both of them.
Four guys on Jordan Davis.
Yeah. He's a guy I would not be surprised if he actually went higher and went top 10. He's that.
The only knock on Jordan Davis is the positional value and the fact that he's a nose tackle and that he's probably not going to be a 3-down player. Obviously, he's not going to be a 3-down player, but I think he can provide enough impact on first down, second down that it's worth having a guy like that. Like, we just bringing it back to the Bengals, since that's the team that we obviously watch the most. Without DJ Reader doing what he does on early downs, the Bengals don't have the ability to do what they do on third down,
right,
against teams like the Chiefs, where they were able to make those big comebacks because they were not able to run the ball anymore.
And DJ Reader was able to bring enough on third down that he wasn't a massive liability there either when he played.
I think Davis brings that. I think he can rush the passer good enough to at least account for him if he happens to be in on a passing down. He is going to at least bring enough that he's a threat. Yeah,
he's not going to be Aaron Donald or Geno Atkins, a defensive tackle, but he's still a guy that can probably get you 6 to 8 sacks a year from that defensive tackle position.
Right.
And he's a guy that's absolutely going to collapse a pocket.
He's going to collapse people. There's some lungs probably if he falls.
So even if he doesn't get to the quarterback, he's going to push the quarterback out to your ends where they can then make the play for you.
Yeah. That's what matters.
So I like it. Like I said, with his athleticism, I wouldn't be surprised if a team as high, if the GM of the Giants was still there, I'd say he'd go fifth to the Giants. That's his
Right.
red dream, but he's gone. But even as high as, say, Atlanta at 8 or Seattle at 9, I wouldn't be overly surprised.
I can see it.
Now we move on to the Texans at 13, who I think this is the absolute best case scenario for them, where a top probably 3 player on my board has fallen to 13, and they compared Derek Stingley and Kyle Hamilton in that defensive backfield and just be insane back there.
Yeah, he's kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit, and there's usually 1 or 2 guys that do that fall down farther than they should, and Hamilton is certainly one of those guys. I know people made maybe not a big deal, but at least they noticed his 40 time. It wasn't the blazing time that some people maybe expected, but he plays faster. You can watch it, and I think that's that happens so often where we look at a guy and what he runs in a 40-yard dash, and I know it's a cliche is the underwear Olympics, but that's really what it is. A guy can run just because a guy, we look at John Ross a few years ago for the Bengals. Mm-hmm. Just because a guy can run really fast does not mean that he's going to be a star, whereas a guy who doesn't look as fast may play faster than what he looks, and that's the case with Hamilton. He doesn't play like a 4.56 or 4.58 or whatever it was guy. He plays faster than that. He can cover the entire field. This was a guy that most people were absolutely positive before the combine that was going to be a top 5 pick. Positional value probably hurts him a little bit. Safeties don't typically go top 5 or especially top 3. So maybe it doesn't make really a lot of sense when they pick the first time. But having him fall all the way to them at 13 has got to be pretty exciting if you're the Texans GM.
And not saying that Kyle Hamilton is going to be Ed Reed, but Ed Reed ran a 4.57. So that just shows you that
it's not a requirement in the safety position in particular. I think instincts matter way more than speed. Like if you have the instincts to be able to read in advance where the ball is going to be going, then I think that matters more than your speed because you're breaking on the ball much quicker, and I think that has more value than just straight line speed. In a 3-yard dash. It does to me anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Hamilton's going to be fantastic. We always blow 40 times up, whether they're too fast or too slow or one way or the other. He's going to be just fine.
Yeah. I think I don't know that there's a better. I don't know if there's a better result from this early part of the draft than Hamilton falling down to 13. A pretty good turn of events. For them. The Ravens are up next, and another team that last year dealt with a ton of injuries, and this as Bengals fans, we got to watch the Bengals whip up on them for maybe the first time ever. That badly in one season. They were missing so many guys at so many different positions, and so going into this year, they certainly have some different ways that they can go. Looking at the board and what's available, excuse me. You could see them going maybe a linebacker, one of the first whichever linebacker they value the most, because the Ravens are a team that certainly values the linebacker position. They did draft one, not too long ago. They drafted a pass rusher that we talked about a little bit earlier on this show. But I think here it's more of a best player available type situation. And I think that for me, they've got Lamar Jackson, who obviously is a weapon that is just so unique around the league. But I think that getting him more weapons is something that they need to look to. Like they've got some guys, but I don't think they have a guy that really is somebody that I look at and go like, this is the guy we need to focus on, kind of like Jamar Chase in Cincinnati or Justin Jefferson in Minnesota and so on and so on. So I think that at this pick, and he's, I believe, I'm trying to look at my list here, and I believe he's the highest rated player that I have on the board, coming off an injury. So, that's going to factor in. But I think that he'll be healthy enough, quick enough, that he still has enough value to make him worthwhile here. And that's going to be Jameson Williams from Alabama.
Extremely fast. We saw what he could do on the field this whole season. My only concern with Jameson Williams here is you don't think him and Hollywood Brown are too similar. Like, I know he's a better player than Hollywood Brown is.
Brown's good. I'm not sold that Hollywood Brown is anywhere near a number one receiver.
No,
I think he's more of a nice number three guy, maybe a number two if he can get his hands and everything figured out. But I think that Jameson Williams is just a huge upgrade on.
He is. Oh, he absolutely is. I don't hate the pick at all. Lamar Jackson needs some weapons. So it makes sense. You don't want Mark Andrews being the only weapon you got.
Right.
Which I do. I like Jameson Williams and Rashad Bateman. I like how they pair off each other. Those would be my one.
Yeah, they did draft Bateman, and he could be number one. I wasn't quite as high on him as everyone else was, so maybe that plays into my thoughts on Jameson Williams. Even if Bateman's as good as people think he is, look at again. I hate to keep going back to the Bengals, but that's just kind of a point of reference for me since I'm a Bengals guy first. With you got two number one, top 5 receiver, top 10 receiver in the league, and Jamar Chase, but you've got T. Higgins not far behind him. So if you have, then Tyler Boyd's pretty daggone good. So if you've got a 1-2 pair, if Jameson Williams and Bateman both end up being as good as we think that they can be, then now you've got to pair them with Andrews, and you've got no more excuses for Lamar Jackson. If nothing else, he's got the weapons to succeed.
Yeah, and that I'm a big Jameson Williams fan. He probably goes higher than this if not for the injury. Will he be healthy at the beginning of the season? Maybe to have him ready for the beginning of the season either. They can get by with Hollywood Brown and Rashad Bateman and those guys until he is ready if he's not. But it makes sense. Now we come to the 15th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a lot of ways they could go. Jameson Williams was actually going to be the guy I picked here. So that threw me off a little bit. All the guys that I have left almost feel like a little bit of a reach at 15. There's not one guy I look at here that fits what I think the Eagles want to draft, and I go, that's the guy that I have to have here. I think they want to upgrade receiver opposite of Devontae Smith. The great Jalen Reagor experience did not work out. I think they want a cornerback opposite Darius Slay. All those guys. All the guys at those positions kind of fit in this range, I guess. So I'm going to switch it up and go with a guy who I think is actually pretty similar to Devontae Smith, and go Chris Olave, wide receiver, Ohio State. I think they're both excellent route runners. I think both of them are guys who can get deep. I think it's going to give Jalen Hurts another strong weapon to throw the ball to. I think the Eagles have to do something if they're going to keep Hurts in there, give him all the weapons that they can.
Well, I think that's kind of it's going to be his audition year. If they give him more weapons and he plays not as well as they need him to play, then next year you go into a pretty good quarterback draft or quarterback class, and you have to take one next year.
And they have multiple picks next year because they already made a trade with
Saints.
the Saints, which is a strange thing to do beforehand if you aren't planning on.
Great, and I get it because it really is, and I didn't even think about it when the trade happened, but I saw some people talking about it afterwards. And you're talking about the Eagles with 3 first-round picks. Well, that's 3 first-round, 5th-round options you got to pick up in a few years. That makes it difficult, especially since none of the 3 are probably going to be a quarterback this year. Like now,
Right.
It's they don't really need 3 first-round guys, especially if you can pick up another guy for next year and wait and see if you need a quarterback and if you need to trade up. Now you've got an extra pick next year to work with to make that happen. So there's some reasoning behind it that makes sense.
I thought it made sense for Philadelphia. I don't get what New Orleans doing. You're trading
Saints had a little bit more of a question mark on their side, yeah, because if you're acquiring extra pieces,
you have no idea who's going to be there.
This range, I'm not sure what the sensibility is, but the Saints have done weird things before. I'm not. My philosophy is you don't trade up in the first round unless you're trading up for a quarterback. They traded up obviously for a defensive end here just 3-4 years, not that long ago.
Yeah.
So they've proven in the past that they are willing to do some things of that nature. And speaking of the Saints, we'll segue right on to pick 16. That is the New Orleans Saints. The Saints need a quarterback for the future going forward. I'm not sold that they're going to pick one here. I could see them picking one here, and maybe they should pick one here. And I think they would probably if Willis fell. The question is at this point, who the number 2 quarterback is in this class, because I don't have any real feel for who it is at all. It could be Pickett. It could be Ritter. It could be from North Carolina, whose name just completely
Sam Howell.
Sam Howell. Could be any, even a couple of the other guys, Matt Corral from Ole Miss. I don't have no sense at all for who the number 2 quarterback is around the league, and maybe in some cases number 1 quarterback, because I highly doubt that Willis is the number 1 quarterback on everyone's board. But I think here with the way the board has fallen, they can kind of go a little bit different way. They do have Winston, who didn't play badly last year. When he started the year out, he looked fairly good.
Yeah.
You're going to rely on him to be your quarterback of the future and long-term answer. But I think that one of the big problems is the offensive line, especially with having lost Armstead. So I've got a player on my board who is a top 10 player overall, and a tackle and one that I really like, and I think as just a pure tackle would be over Ekwonu for me. Ekwonu has more versatility and can play inside, but Charles Cross for me is my number 2 tackle. Moves really well. He's got great footwork, and I have him. I believe he might be number 10 actually, exactly on my board. But anyway, he's I think a lot of him, and he's kind of fallen a little bit here. So I think that this is a good spot. The Saints can pick up a guy who could solidify their left tackle position for the future, and then kind of determine what to do with that second first-round pick here just a bit.
Actually, who I thought you were going to pick for Baltimore was Charles
I considered
Cross.
it. He was the other option. That was the other guy that I thought. But the reports are that the Ravens are getting their tackle, whose name I'm so bad with names. Ronnie Stanley. Is expected to be healthy, so I think that kind of bolsters them a little bit and gives them a little bit more option. If he wasn't 100% back or they weren't sure, then I think it makes a little more sense to take Cross. But if he's going to be, if they expect him to be back and healthy, then I think that opens it up. They don't have to feel like they have to pick a tackle.
Right. Absolutely. Charles Cross is the top 10 player on my board too, so it's a great pick. The Chargers are at number 17. I think the Chargers are praying that Jordan Davis falls to them. I think that's who they want. I think
Makes
That's
more sense. That's one of the
um,
more popular first-round picks.
but he's not here. So the Chargers have a few ways they can go. They could go cornerback. They could use cornerback help. I think they could still use some wide receiver help. They got Keenan Allen. They got Mike Williams. But I think adding more weapons to Herbert is never a bad plan. Like we talked about the other young quarterbacks, you can never have too many weapons.
Sure.
I think Devontae Wyatt is an option. I don't know that I like him as a 24-year-old with domestic violence charges.
Well, that's that's
17.
the problem.
So I think I'm going to take not my cornerback 3, but I know he has a lot of people's cornerback 3. I'm going to give them Trent McDuffie. I like Trent McDuffie. He's a talented kid. The short arms scare me. I know he had some fairly short arms. I can't remember exactly what they were. But when you watched him at Washington, he was very good in coverage. He stuck with his guy. I think he gives you the option to play inside or outside, depending on where you want him.
That's an important point, is that he can play outside or in. He's a versatile player.
So I think he gives the Chargers a lot of options back in that secondary. And in that division, you're going to need all the cornerback help you can get.
Sure. Yeah.
You've got Mahomes, you've got Wilson, you've got Carr, you've got Devontae Adams, you've got the trio that Denver has. Cornerback help is going to be at a premium in that division.
Absolutely. That's the division really overall, and has really transformed itself almost. They've had an influx of players, and not just good players, but really good players.
Yeah.
With Russell Wilson obviously coming in as a quarterback, but then a guy like Devontae Adams, is coming in to give the Raiders more weapons. So there's it's going to be. It may have quickly transformed itself into the toughest division in football.
One of two for sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's really much of a way to argue.
No,
it's going to be a tough division, and one that is a division that is predicated on offense. Like there's going to be a lot of high scoring games in that division, going forward.
Yes, there is. It's going to be much of the way that the AFC North was known for running and defense before. This division is going to be known for passing and offense.
The Blake's phone was just giving us the signal to go on to the next pick. This draft is also interesting. It seems like so many teams, and maybe it just feels that way, but it seems like so many teams have more than one pick in this first round.
I think 7 do.
Yeah,
maybe.
There's a bunch, and we've already had the Jets pick twice, the Giants pick twice, the Texans pick twice, and now we're up to the Eagles again, who have their second pick. They did have 3, but they have their second pick here. They picked a wide receiver earlier, which obviously is going to be a need. There's talk of Jalen Reagor possibly being on his way out. He hasn't quite panned out as well as they may have hoped that he would. So certainly they need weapons on offense. Devonta Smith is really good, but J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, a kind of a failed pick from a few years ago, is apparently moving to tight end.
Yes.
They've got some flux on that offense. But as far as this pick goes, they could technically pick another receiver, to be quite honest, and it wouldn't be that bad. I don't think they do. I think the top receivers, at least on my board, are kind of out of play here. So I think they're going to go to the other side of the ball on this one. The Eagles are another team that likes to have a active and very good defense. They like to win games and keep scoring down. And I think they're another team that they've got Slay on one side playing cornerback, but I think that if they can strengthen the other half, then I think that's something that they do here. And then it becomes a question of which cornerback do they like more. And I'm not an Eagles guy, so I don't know their personal preferences as far as measurements and things of that nature. So I'm going to go with the one that I have graded higher, and that is Andrew Booth from Clemson.
I almost went with him at 15. He was the other guy I was debating about.
He's not as big and physical, or at least not as. He tries to be physical. He's not as big as Elam from Florida, or Gardner, who we saw was already gone earlier. But he is quick. I think he has good instincts, and good enough ball skills to be successful. I think he's a really, really well-rounded player. Like he doesn't have a huge hole in his game. He's a willing tackler, and so he's got he edges out maybe a Kyler Gordon or Elam here for the spot.
Yeah. Like I said, he was the other guy I was thinking about at 15. So him here at 18 makes perfect sense. And then we move on to the Saints with their second pick of the draft. They took the offensive tackle earlier, which I do think is a bigger need on their board. Terran Armstead is gone. They need somebody to pick up that left tackle position. Jameis Winston has shown in his past that he will throw enough interceptions on his own. You don't need him worrying about a pass rush coming up the middle on him or off the edge. So now you pair him with their right tackle. You pair Cross with their right tackle, who's Ryan, whose name escapes me. Yeah, there you go. Who's one of the better right tackles in the league. And you give them a strong tackle duo. Here, I think with the up with them not knowing what Michael Thomas is going to do, they need another wide receiver, another weapon for Winston to throw the ball to. And the best one on my board right now is Treylon Burks.
Yeah.
I think he gives you obviously great after the catchability. He's a guy that when he gets the ball in his hands, he can be absolutely electric. Didn't run as fast as I know some people wanted to see him run, but I wasn't concerned with the 4.52 or whatever it was he ran. He's another guy that on tape shows that he's plenty fast enough to play. And I think that if they do have Michael Thomas back, then that gives you a great 1-2 duo. And if you don't, then this gives you somebody to come in and make some plays for you.
Right. The Steelers are they're up next, and I think I feel pretty confident in saying that we've probably at one of these picks we've made is going to be a quarterback, whether it's from someone trading up, and there's talk
probably
among some rumors that the Steelers may potentially trade up for a pick for a quarterback in particular. But some of these other teams, the Falcons and the Seahawks, the Saints, they may trade up or take one if it falls to them. So I think we're in the real thing happens tomorrow. There's probably going to be a couple of these quarterbacks already off the board, but for this exercise, other than Willis, they're all available, and I think the Steelers are a team that's going to draft one. I think the slide, so to speak, of all the rest of the quarterbacks kind of stops here. Now the question becomes which one, as we talked about. I don't have any feel at all for who the consensus, or even if there is one, number 2 guy is around the league. I think the Steelers playing in Pittsburgh. I'm gonna knock Kenny Pickett out of the running. He has the smaller hands. He's not as big as the other guys.
Yeah.
And really, even despite his size, because that doesn't really matter, the height, as far as that goes. But with the small hands and the cold weather, I think they may talk themselves out of Pickett, despite the fact that he actually is my number 2 quarterback. the guy that I'm going to give them is someone that I personally don't have graded as high. I think I have a 3rd round grade on him even. But I know there are a lot of people that have him higher. So I'm having him as the number 1 quarterback in the draft. And I can see why they do. It just doesn't fit the mold that I have. And I'm going to give them Desmond Ridder.
There have been some talks that I've seen on Twitter that while Malik Willis is the quarterback that I guess Pittsburgh prefers, that they do really like Ridder.
Yeah.
So I think if Willis is
because of he's more of the classic, what you would look for. He's tall, he's got a nice arm. He can run. He's athletic. So I think he is more closer to the prototype that they would look for, especially the Steelers, like I said, playing in that cold weather.
I think that if Willis is gone and Ridder's there, I think Ridder is who they take. But you're right in the fact that somebody is going to trade up or take a quarterback higher. It may not be Ridder. Ridder may still be there. Kenny Pickett could go up here. Matt Corral could go up here. Sam Howell could go up here.
Sure. They could be really any one of them, and I wouldn't be surprised.
No. So it's a weird draft as far as quarterbacks go, but I think Pittsburgh, as long as one of the couple guys that they like is there, takes one.
Yeah.
And now we move on to another team that I never know what they're going to do, and the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
I think this is where the first linebacker goes. He seems like a New England Patriots kind of guy. I'm going to give them Devin Lloyd from Utah. Very good linebacker, can rush the passer, can do a lot of things in that defense, and seems like a very Belichick kind of guy. He can move him all over the defense. He can, blitz him. He can drop into coverage. He can do a lot of stuff with him. I don't want to. Kind of reminds me of a more athletic Kyle Van Noy in a way, where he can do a little bit of everything. May not end up being the best at anything, but I think that he's the kind of guy that Bill Belichick's going to love on defense.
Yeah, and the Packers are another team that has always valued the linebacker position. They've had some really good linebackers over the years, and they kind of are the leaders. They've had some great secondary guys and some great defensive linemen, but they also have always kind of predicated the defense, seems like, around the linebackers. They've had some really, really good linebackers that kind of lead the defense. The Green Bay Packers are up next. The draft is kind of, depending on how you want to look at it, the draft is kind of played out poorly, I think, as far as the way fans would want it to go, because like every single Packers fan in the entire world is screaming for them to please, for the love of all that is holy, get some wide receiver help for Aaron Rodgers. They've passed on it time and time again. They've went other ways. They picked a backup quarterback that still isn't playing. A few years ago, they picked everything except for wide receivers. They've notoriously avoided wide receivers in the first round. So if you're looking at it as from a fan, then you're looking at it as all the top receivers are off the board. My highest rated receiver remaining on the board is, I believe, Dotson from Penn State. And I just don't have him as a first-round pick. I think it would be a reach to do that. So if you look at receivers being their biggest need, then maybe you think, oh gosh, this is not played out well for us. But if you're looking at it from the Packers' point of view, I don't know that they're going to pick one because they just don't. They haven't done it. Should they? Probably, but they just continually, time and time again, have had needs at receiver and have not really addressed it. So I'm not sure that they were going to anyway. So I go back to really sort of a best player available type situation, and the best player available on my board, and by fairly large margin, or at least as large a margin as as you can kind of reasonably have at this point, is going to be a offensive lineman, and I spoke about him a little bit ago. But Kenyon Green from Texas A&M is a guy that I have a top 10 grade on as well. Watching his tape, he just jumped off the page. He's also versatile. He played everything except for center, and played it all well. Like he got SEC honors at multiple positions, and so I think you can plug him in at guard, and he's going to be an impact starter right off the bat. Give Rogers some protection, and then you hope that maybe one of your next grouping of receivers makes it to you in round 2, or again, as I mentioned earlier, there are some receivers that may be on the market. So if you can manage to go out and find a way to acquire an AJ Brown, for example, would be really ideal. But also Deebo Samuel as well, or any other receiver that may come up as available because this year's been crazy already. And who knows who the next receiver is going to be that decides they don't want to be where they're at anymore.
Also, Green Bay picks again at 28. They're one of the teams that has 2 picks.
Yeah. There's it's like there's only 16 teams picking in the first round. Each team gets picked twice.
There's a bunch. There's a bunch of picks second. 23rd is the Arizona Cardinals, and I thought you were again going to steal my pick. You did not, but the highest player on my board is still left. And I think he fits a need for the Cardinals. And I'm going to take George Karlaftis.
Yeah, he's also a guy that is kind of fallen down, and maybe he's kind of gotten overlooked because of the depth of this edge class. And so you've got all these, guys being talked about as top 5 picks in the other guys. And so Karlaftis kind of gets overlooked a little bit. But he's really good.
They lost Chandler Jones. Karlaftis they're going to need somebody to come in and rush the passer. He's never going to be a guy that he's not going to be that speed guy that comes around the edge, but he converts speed to power very well. And he's going to be, maybe not a 15 sack a year guy. He's a guy that seems like he's going to be in that 10 to 12 range most years.
Right. Well, he does everything well.
Yes.
He's a pass rusher and can certainly make an impact with a speed rush or get to the quarterback. But he also plays the run well. He sets the edge well. He's a smart player, and it's easy to see him. He may make a quicker impact than a guy like Thibodeau, or Walker, who may maybe have a few bumps in the beginning. I think Karlaftis may be able to step in and contribute more quickly than those guys.
Yeah.
Good pick. I like Karlaftis. The Cowboys are up next at 24, and they're a team that feels like they're so close. Like, obviously they have good receivers. They've got a good quarterback. Last year their defense took a pretty large step forward. They've got they've got big time players, that are still on that team on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. So it feels like they're really just neat. Micah Parsons was obviously a ridiculously talented player that they added last year. So they've done a really good job at acquiring talent in the draft and letting kind of the draft come to them. They picked CeeDee Lamb, even though they may not have really needed a receiver as much as other positions that year. But he was clearly value, so they took it. And then same with Parsons, fell a little bit to them last year, and so they went ahead and made the move and got Parsons. So they've let talent come to them, and I kind of think that's what's happening again this year. One of the needs that they do have, excuse me, that they do have is up front on the offensive line, as some of their stalwarts, so to speak, are starting to get a little bit older. They've had some injury issues recently, Tyron Smith and Zach Martin in particular. So at this point, I think they get good value because he's a guy that I have graded much higher, and it fills a position of need. So it's kind of a perfect storm here, and that is Zion Johnson, the guard.
Yes, I think they're hoping Kenyon Green falls to them. I don't know that Zion Johnson is much worse than Green.
I don't have them a little bit lower. I think I have Green is top 10, but Johnson's top 20 on my board. So it's not.
No, Zion Johnson is fantastic. He has really worked his way up draft boards this year. Great pick. I really like that pick for Dallas. Let's see, 25th, Buffalo. Buffalo is in a spot where they don't necessarily have a huge need on the roster. Gabe Davis kind of had a coming out party last year. So you probably feel pretty happy with him and Diggs. I mean, everybody can use receiver help, but it's not a pressing need. Josh Allen does everything.
Right.
That offensive line's pretty good. Their defensive line, they've got talent on. Gregory So come in and played pretty well as a rookie.
They're going to be on the short list of going into the 2022 season. They're going to be on the short list of teams that are predicted to win the Super Bowl. Like they're top end. They're a top 5 at least on paper. Obviously, you can't predict injuries or somebody showing up and playing as well as they should. But they're on the short list of teams that should be in contention for the Super Bowl.
Oh, absolutely. And they have 2 positions, I guess, that I'm really looking between in the first round. Looking at just some mock drafts earlier today, Breece Hall was a popular pick. I didn't like his tape as much as I liked his testing. I feel like 25 is too early for a running back in this draft. There's nobody that I look at and just think they're a first rounder.
Right.
So I'm going to slot them in a cornerback to go opposite of Tre'Davious White and go with Kaiir Elam here. I wouldn't be surprised if he went higher. I don't necessarily have him graded higher.
There is
but I know
that he's kind of a late riser.
Yeah. He's a little grabby for my liking.
Specifically in my notes that he wrote that he is grabby. And he's not really a very good tackler. I think that he can get at that, but right now he's not. He
has the athleticism and the body to be a good tackler if he wants to be. It's just a matter of, as most cornerbacks, you have to want to tackle as a cornerback, and sometimes it's a business decision not to. So I get it, but I think teams are going to love his athleticism. I think they're going to like his ball skills and his size. And I think he would pencil in pretty well as the cornerback 2 there in Buffalo.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense for them at that spot. 26th is the Titans. Now, the Titans are another team that I find to be just fascinating. Last year, they made a run into the playoffs. They were, again, a good team. Their defense was playing really well, but they had some issues, and they have some further issues now with reportedly A.J. Brown maybe not wanting to be there any longer. We'll see how that plays out. They traded for Julio Jones, and that didn't work out really at all. So they, even with the acquisition, I should say, of Robert Woods, I think they still need receiver help, especially if A.J. Brown declines to play and they end up having to trade him. Then I think they have pretty huge need at receiver. But again, as we talked about with Green Bay, there's not really a receiver here that I want to make. What I could see them doing, and I've seen a few grumblings as far as, and we watched it. Obviously, the Bengals knocked the Titans out of the playoffs in a game where the biggest liability on the field for them was the quarterback.
Yep.
So I think this could be a sneaky spot for a quarterback pick, and I am going to give the Titans a quarterback. I think this is a decent spot for one later in first round. I don't have any first round grades on any of these guys, but I think that when you can pick a quarterback, if you think that there's a chance that he is a franchise guy, then you take him. You get that 5th year, and you go ahead and make that move. And with the quarterbacks kind of falling into place on this exercise, at least down the board just a little bit, then I could see the Titans making the pick here, and I'm going to go ahead and take Matt Corral from Ole Miss.
I could definitely see it. Ryan Tannehill took a step back last year as quarterback. Part of that's probably because Derrick Henry missed some time. But you don't want your quarterback to be predicated on your running back being healthy.
Because running backs are almost never completely healthy.
Right. And you got to think that Derrick Henry's built like nobody I've seen before. Let's start there.
Sure.
But this could be the beginning of the end for Derrick Henry. He has a lot of mileage on him, and running backs don't stay healthy.
Well, he's carrying the ball a ton too. Like they're completely, I don't want to say completely reliant, but they're heavily reliant on the legs of Derrick Henry. And
he's not a guy like Barry Sanders who didn't take big hits. Derrick Henry looks for violence.
Yeah, of course.
So I think getting a quarterback that you think can potentially be better than Ryan Tannehill is a good plan at this part of the draft.
I think they have even similar games. I don't think they have to change their offense a lot.
No, they wouldn't.
Can move and run the ball when necessary. They're both athletic. Corral has a nice arm. He can throw the ball a long ways and get the ball down the field. That's something that they'll need to address and get some speed, which I would. We're not going past the first round, but I think in the second round, getting some speed at receiver is something that they really need to do. But the problem with Corral and the reason, and I have a little bit lower grade on him as well. He has more, like I said, the prototypical size, but he doesn't really. Being able to throw off platform is a big part of today's game, especially seeing what Mahomes has done.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, Joe Burrow did it, quite a bit this year. So that's a big part of a necessary game and something he needs to be better at. That was my biggest knock on him was his ability to throw the ball accurately off platform. But he has good size, good athleticism, a good arm. So I think that could, and like I said, he plays similar to Tannehill. So I think that makes sense for me.
Yeah, no, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And they've got a good offensive line that can protect him. So he fits very well there. Moving on to Tampa Bay at 27, another team that doesn't really have a ton of needs. They are set at most positions. So it really comes down to two players for me. But I think I'm going to take the one that does fit with Jordan Whitehead leaving to the Jets. They could use another safety back there. And my number 2 safety in this draft is Brisker from Penn State. Dax Hill was in thought there, whichever safety you prefer more. I think Hill may be more of a slot guy in the NFL, more than just a true safety.
Right.
No. I'm going to backtrack. I forgot I want Lewis Seen from Georgia.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I forgot that he was a person for a minute.
I forgot.
I'm going to go with him over Brisker. I like Seen a lot. I think he could step in day one and be a starting safety on that team, and really kind of do the stuff that Whitehead did for them. I almost took David Ojabo there as a guy the Buccaneers could sit for a year because they've got so much.
It would make sense for a team like if somebody's going to take the shot in the first round, and I don't know that anybody will because it's not like Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams may be back for a good portion of the season. Ojabo's not. He just injured his Achilles. Excuse me. Not that far ago, so he's missing the season. He's probably not giving you anything.
No, probably not.
A team that is needs to add impact players right away. It just doesn't really make sense. But if somebody's going to do it, I could see a team like the Buccaneers. So it wouldn't be out of the realm.
But I do think they need a safety to come in and replace Whitehead. He played a big role in the defense. So I think they ultimately go ahead and pick the guy that can play this year for them.
Right. The Packers are back on the clock here, and they they just picked a few picks ago, so not a lot has changed as far as the value on the board and things like that. They picked an offensive lineman last time. They still need a receiver, and this is the next receiver on my board. As I said, is Dotson out of Penn State. May not be necessarily the ideal pick. There's certainly some defensive players that they could go with as well here. You're starting to get into a situation where Devontae Wyatt may come into some teams' play. It depends on how he's seen around the league because of the off-field issues. Really, Wyatt is a curious pick. Like if he's cleared by teams around the league, then or if he didn't have the problems at all, I guess would be the ideal situation.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a guy who could go top 10, top 15, but he's it's kind of hard to predict where he's going to fall based on the things that we can't know for sure, being the off-field issues. But this would be a spot that certainly he could come into play. They could add a cornerback if they like a guy like Kyler Gordon enough to go with here. But I think that in this situation, maybe due to some fan pressure, because they've heard about it for so many years now, as we talked about earlier. But I think it's high enough here. I have a very high second round grade on Dotson, and so I think here I go ahead and make him the pick. He's fast. He's a pretty solid guy after the catch. He's a deep threat, and certainly with Rodgers' arm, giving them a guy like that, because right now they don't really have with Devontae Adams gone. You're talking about a receiver room that's pretty lacking in top end talent, at least as it stands now, unless they make a trade of some kind. So I'm going to go ahead and make the pick here for Dotson and give them another weapon for Rodgers. If nothing else, Rodgers should be pretty happy.
Yeah. I like Dotson. He's actually wasn't my top receiver on the board at that point, but he does have an early second round grade for me. Makes a lot of sense. I know he's got a first round grade from quite a few people that I've seen. So I think he'll be in play somewhere in this mid-20s range. And then at the 29th pick, with the first of their two picks, is the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that the Chiefs are another team that's going to be looking at receiver. They added Juju Smith-Schuster. They added Valdez-Scantling. Neither should be looked at as a reason they don't need a receiver.
Right.
And I'm going to give them my top receiver on the board. And I think he had a chance to be the top receiver on the board, if not for an injury this year. And that's George Pickens.
I think the issue with Pickens is possibly also some off-field issues. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, there's some issues they said about his maturity. I don't know enough to know whether that's actually a thing. But I think if somebody will take a chance on it and not be concerned about it, it's Andy Reid. I think he feels like he's got a strong enough hold on that locker room that he's not going to be super concerned with that. And Pickens shows a lot of – he may not never be that talented, but he shows a lot of A.J. Green in his game. He's got the length. He's got the same size. He's got the ability to go up and get the ball. He's got the after-the-catch ability. And he's just a downright nasty blocker if you want him to be.
He really is, yeah. You certainly seen quite a few highlights posted in recent days, just leveling backs in when he goes out the block, or even downfield blocking and things like that. So yeah, he certainly can't knock his effort in in that part of his game. The Chiefs actually pick again. They have back-to-back picks in round one at 29 and 30. with the second pick, I tend to go back to the other side of the ball. You gave them a weapon. If they're going to pick a weapon in the first, with one of the picks, I think the other one goes to the second, to the defense. And for me, it goes to the secondary. They don't have really a lot in the secondary. No. And one of the areas that they really came back to bite them big time last year in both of their losses to the Bengals at the end of the season was that they just had no chance of covering Chase and T. Higgins and even Boyd to a degree. So I think you go get some help for the secondary. The last cornerback that I have with a high enough grade to matter, I think I may have a first round on him, or at least an early second round. But that's Kyler Gordon. And I think he plays fairly early on. We mentioned his ex-teammate, McDuffie, a little bit ago as being a guy who can play inside or outside. I think Gordon is the same. I think he can play either inside or outside. And I think he just makes too much sense here with the Chiefs seeing the way their secondary kind of bit them in those games versus the Bengals.
Yeah, he does, and the Chiefs need some defensive help. There were several ways you could have went here on defense, and I think it would have been a good pick for them. So he definitely makes sense here. And then at 31, we move to the Bengals here. And this puts the Bengals in a kind of a tough situation if they're picking here, because all your cornerbacks essentially are off the board. I don't think there's another cornerback here that you can pick in the first and feel good about it. I know who the best player on my board is left, but I don't know that the Bengals want to pick an offensive lineman.
Right.
I don't know how they feel on that. They signed 3.
My thought is that they may be,
They got Jonah Williams, and they just took Carman.
And so I think there's a chance that they see enough out of Carman that they don't feel pressured into picking another offensive lineman.
Then you look at the next best player on the board, who I think pretty easily is Devontae Wyatt. But Devontae Wyatt's got a lot of off-the-field stuff, and Zach Taylor seems to be moving away from those riskier picks here recently. Right. I don't know how they're going to feel about him, which then takes all 3 of your biggest needs kind of out the window. So you're either, I think ideally they want to trade down. I think this is a spot for somebody to jump the lines when the Lions may want a quarterback at 32 to get that 5th-year option.
Right.
But obviously in this scenario, we're not doing trade downs.
Sure.
So this really is a nightmare scenario for me. I'm trying to look through my list of players here. The question to me becomes, do they go ahead and pick the offensive lineman because he's the best player on the board? Or do they pick somebody at a position that's not necessarily a need right now, but could become a need? I think those are their choices here. No, I can't do it. I'm going to take Tyler Linderbaum. I have to. I think the other player that they could consider here would be Hall from Houston.
I think that Hall is going to be in play. I think they're going to like Hall's versatility. Again, they need interior pass rushes, and I think he can do that. But I think he can also play on the edge on running downs as well. So I think that is somebody they will. I think he's somebody that's going to be in play. I think that a sneaky position that, depending, and I'm not inside the organization, so I don't know how negotiations are. with
Jesse Bates.
Jesse Bates. My name, I'm so bad with names. Jesse Bates. But if they aren't feeling good about where they're at with Jesse Bates right now, then I could see a safety selected here, Brisker or Hill or whoever, depending on how the earlier picks fall out. Obviously,
Dax Hill was a guy that I thought about. Daniel Jeremiah has the Bengals picking Ojabo. Take that for what you will.
I mean, I wouldn't hate that, but like I feel like the Bengals, and we've kind of talked about this before, the Bengals are in a Super Bowl window now. They've got 2 years before they got to start paying much more advanced salary to Burrow. And so picking a guy who doesn't contribute this year just seems like it would be out of character for them, especially with considering how many first-round picks they've had over the past several years that they always seem to be – they never seem to have their first-round picks available for their rookie seasons. So I don't know if they want to do that again. As far as Ojabo goes, I do, and I kind of pointed this out earlier on Twitter, talking to someone. I don't think it was you, but someone. We were talking about Devontae Wyatt in particular. The Bengals, it should be noted, do have at least some degree of success picking a player kind of
they do
in that similar mold with Joe Mixon, who had an incident, in college, of course, that was very well publicized and was videoed. And who has, really been a model citizen since they drafted him, has been a big part of their success. So I don't know. Obviously, it was not Zach Taylor that drafted Mixon.
Right.
I don't know how he might feel personally, but if they feel the value is good enough, and then I could see it again, depending on the homework that they have the ability to do that we don't. They, I assume, have met with him, and so that would play a huge, huge part that's impossible for us to replicate here.
If Wyatt's there and they feel comfortable with his off field, I think he's probably the pick.
He makes the most sense because you're taking a guy who is a fantastic interior pass rusher. So it fits a need. He's a value pick talent-wise. Like I said, he's probably a top 15, top 20 guy at worst if there's no off-field incident. So there's value. There's a need. There's a talent. That he obviously has, comes from a school that they like and have historically picked from in Georgia. So there's another small note, but yeah, I think that it may come down to the interior pass rusher, whether it's Wyatt or Hall, or somebody else that they like, or a cornerback if one drops, and then possibly a safety or possibly Linderbaum, depending. I think they want to pick another offensive lineman.
One other name on the offensive line that should be watched out for is Tyler Smith. A lot of talk about him being taken at the end of the first round.
I have a very high. I'm a huge fan of Tyler Smith. I have pointed it out multiple times, and I don't want to spend too much time on the Bengals because this is not a Bengals show. But being that we're both Bengals fans, it just naturally comes in. But yes, Tyler Smith is a guy that I've been saying since January, since I watched his tape, to at least be wary of if you are Bengals fans, or be aware of rather, because he is a kind of guy that the Bengals are going to like. He's the kind of guy that anybody's going to like. If you've watched him block in the run game, he is as nasty a blocker. Like when he blocks, he won't stop until his man is on the ground.
Yep.
He wants to bury somebody on every play. He's just mean in the blocking. His pass blocking game needs some work. So that could be something that, but the Bengals really emphasize the ability to run block. So I think he could be a sneaky pick as well for that first round pick.
And I think the last guy I think might go there is I think that McCreary has a chance to go in the first round. I really like Roger McCreary.
Typical thresholds. Joe Goodberry has talked about this quite a bit on Twitter. Because of his arm length, it's not the type that they typically like. I do like him as a player.
Yeah,
he has a lot. There's definitely a lot to like with him. And if he had longer arms, I think he's easily a first round pick. But he does have really short arms, which is kind of a theme for these players that we've talked about. Linderbaum obviously has epically short arms, one of the shorter arms in the history of arm measurements for centers over the years. And then we talked about. The other McDuffie earlier.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about arms quite a bit. Even Hutchinson from Michigan, the pass rusher, who we took much earlier. There's question marks. One of the question marks that he does have is that arm length. Close out the first round is the Detroit Lions, who have another team that has a second first-round pick. And you kind of called your shot here. I think this is the point where, depending on who falls and how it plays out, I think the ability to pick a quarterback if one that they like drops to them. I don't know who they like out of this group, but I have similar grades on both Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell. I have Pickett a little higher, so Pickett is going to be the pick here, but I think they go ahead and get their quarterback at this point, and then let it play out however it plays out. I think Pickett is a little more NFL ready, so if they need him to play earlier, I think he can. I think he's got a lot of obviously he played. He has a lot of experience. He's been a starter for more than 1 year. Has a good arm. Has at times had accuracy issues, but we've seen quarterbacks overcome that, especially here over the last few years. And despite the smallish hands, I think that he makes some sense here for the Lions, who while they play north, they play in a dome stadium.
Yeah. What blows my mind about some of these guys is Kenny Pickett has 8.5-inch hands. I measured mine earlier today just for funsies, just to see.
Right.
I got 9 3/4-inch hands. I don't understand how a 6'3" guy has such.
It's weird how that works out. Like the same with the arm length. Like they're so strange. Who has these ridiculously long arms or short arms or small hands? I think mine were 9.5 maybe or something. Mine were over 9 as well when I measured mine. But Joe Burrow has not quite that small, but
no, his were 9-inch.
They were smaller as far as what average quarterback has. But I think that he's played with it. I think there's something to be said for that. He's played well. He's managed, to get along this far. Obviously, there's a jump from college to the pros, but I think he's a guy that has enough talent that you can feel comfortable taking him. And maybe they wait till next year and they go ahead and go a different direction. But it's really the quarterback class this year is just so hard to predict.
Yeah.
So if they don't pick Willis at 2, which I think is very, very possible.
Same.
And probably who I would pick if it was me, then they go ahead and take the quarterback here. If it doesn't work out and Pickett isn't your guy, obviously we've seen in the past teams, draft a first-round quarterback 1 year and then turn around and draft another first-round quarterback even next year. So
you can take Kenny Pickett at 32, and then if you're picking top 3, take C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young next year. That's okay.
Yeah, but especially since you've got the second first-round pick this year. You're not. It's not like you're coming out of this draft with nothing. Even if Pickett doesn't work out, you still get a guy that you would assume is going to be an impact player at 2, and you still have other picks along the way to work with as well. They have the 34th pick, which we're not going that far, but they would be picking again here in 2 picks.
Yeah.
And can pick another, player that need a receiver or, whatever.
Right. But if you're going to take a quarterback, you take him at 32 to get that 5th-year option.
Yeah. If you're picking 32 and 34 and you want to try to get and you like one of these quarterbacks, then you go ahead and do that at 32, and then you wait till 34 to pick your corner or your offensive lineman or whatever it may be. Left on my board, just to kind of summarize here before we wrap up. Guys that didn't go in the first round who I actually have first-round grades on, or at least would have in my first-round mock draft situations. Because I believe I only have about 20 – I don't have it actually pulled up right now, but I think I only had 24 maybe first-round grades, maybe 25. But some guys that I had left, at least the top of my board, Devontae Wyatt, Nakobe Dean, linebacker, Ojabo when he's healthy, Tyler Smith we talked about, I think could sneak into that first-round area, and Bernhard Raimann, the offensive lineman from Central Michigan, I like a lot and more than some other people. And then McCrary we kind of talked about as well. Those are the guys that I believe I have my next several, say whatever 5 or 6 would be, and then along with Jackson Hill.
A guy who didn't get picked here, who I think goes first round, even though I don't have a first round grade on him. I think Trevor Penning ends up going first round somewhere. Somebody's going to like his athleticism and his, I call it what you will, him just for some reason throwing people around after the whistle at the Senior Bowl. For some reason, got a lot of coverage. If the Bengals didn't hate linebackers, I would say Nakobe Dean is somebody they might look at because Jermaine Pratt's contract is up, I believe, after this season.
Yeah.
Will they be able to pay him? Will they want to pay him with the receivers coming up? I don't know. I would, because I don't think he's going to be that expensive. But the edge from Minnesota, whose name I'm not going to pronounce correctly, Boy Mafi.
Yeah.
I think he's got a chance to sneak in the end of the round. Same with the kid from Penn State, that Arnold Ebiketie.
Another guy that I actually have, speaking of the edge guys, I have either late first or early second. Like I said, I've got, I think, 24 first round grades. And then I have, obviously when you do a mock draft, you have to have 32 first round picks. So I think he kind of falls in that area in between.
Antonio?
But that is Drake Jackson.
Oh, Drake Jackson.
USC.
Yeah.
I really like his game a lot. And I think he could. And it was actually, I saw somebody tweeting about it earlier. And I don't remember who it was now. It was one of the bigger named draft guys saying that he could go earlier than people think. He could be kind of a surprise first round pick or early second. I like him a lot. I have him really high.
I think he could. I think Nick Benito from Oklahoma could. Somebody I like that I seem to be alone on an island on with a first round grade is I really like DeMarvin Leal. Now, I know he didn't test as well as people wanted to see.
Well, I think with Leal, it comes down to where do you play him at, because he's not really big enough to be necessarily, or at least the perception is he's not big enough to. He's kind of a tweener. He's not really a every down defensive tackle, a free technique, but he's not really quick enough, fast enough, fluid enough, whatever term you want to use, to play as a full-time edge rusher either. So the questions become, like, he's clearly a talented guy.
I think you use him and Logan Hall similarly. I think is what you do. He may not be. I can't remember what Logan Hall did at the combine. He's probably tested better, I would imagine. Lil's numbers were very disappointing to me. I thought he played much quicker. But I think he's a guy like that you kind of start out on the edge on early downs and you move him into 3 tech on passing downs.
And that could be. And he could, I mean, clearly he's as far as names go, he's one of the more recognizable names, at least going into the draft process. I don't know where he stands now, if perception around the league, but if you were looking at guys, especially going back to August and September, when you were looking at what guys could be some of the top picks, I think Leal would have been on that list. But throughout the season, and then of course, as we mentioned, through testing, I think that's fallen down some. I think he still could be a day 2 pick just based on talent level, but I don't think. I think his testing and his, like I said, his sort of tweener status is going to work against him some. I could see him being a guy that also drops, even into day 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, clearly a guy that had some talent and was highly regarded at one point. Excuse me. Logan Hall would be the other guy that I didn't mention on my list just a second ago, but we clearly have talked about. I think he could jump up.
Yeah.
Into the first round, even if it's not the Bengals, who we mentioned as a possibility. I think some other teams could see some value there that need defensive line help, which pretty much everybody falls under that umbrella.
Yep.
And could use some guys who can kind of move around the defensive line and chess piece type players.
I was trying to look and see if I saw anybody else that really stood out. No, nobody that I see that I Jalen Petrie could sneak near the end of the first round.
Sure.
Um,
There will be a surprise. Seattle
Yeah.
always pull something out of nowhere, and people, look at each other trying to figure out like what who.
They'll probably pick Bailey Zapp, quarterback from wherever he's from, or something at 9.
They might. Quay Walker's another guy, linebacker from Georgia. We talk about Nakobe Dean a lot, but apparently Walker's pretty highly regarded as well. So
a lot of talk about Christian Watson from North Dakota State at receiver. May sneak up there. Maybe a guy that somebody like Green Bay looks at 28.
Right.
It's going to be weird.
It's going to be interesting. I'm really excited as much as and we're closing in on 2 hours here, so we probably should kind of wrap this up. But it's going to be an interesting draft to watch. I think one of the more interesting ones in recent memory, just because of the unpredictability of this draft. Like, there's so many chances that this draft could go in branching paths that are unexpected along the way. Somebody could trade up for a quarterback earlier than we think. The Lions could go ahead and take Willis. Any one of the edges could go higher than we think they might. You can see guys like Hamilton, who obviously dropped in our exercise here, could fall down. The cornerbacks could go in different, obviously in 7 or 8 different orders. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I really don't know how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
But it's going to be fun to watch, particularly through this first round.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm glad that I'm not having to worry about the Bengals picking in the top 5 this year. Maybe the Bengals will take punter Matt Araiza from San Diego State. A lot of Bengals fans love him.
I don't think that any Bengals fans would complain if they did. The success of Evan McPherson has definitely raised the value for special teamers, kickers and punters in particular.
But no, it should be a fun night tomorrow night, and Friday night and Saturday, and I think Sunday too. Is it 3 or 4 days now? I can't remember.
I think Saturday's the last day, unless they
change
it. I didn't realize it.
I can't remember.
We'll jump back on and talk about whatever does happen over these next 3 days. We'll come back on next week and we'll talk about some of the surprise picks, some of the picks we liked, some of the picks we didn't like, some of the team drafts that we didn't like. We always have some different agreements on that. I might guess different agreements. That's an oxymoron. But that's who did well, who did not well. Maybe we'll throw in some grades. I know everybody doesn't like the draft grades, considering you don't know how it's going to turn out. But I think it's interesting to give some preliminary thoughts on how they did or how we perceive that they did. And then you can revisit that kind of thing a few years down the road. And maybe that'll be a future podcast. Maybe we'll go back and look at the drafts of a few years ago and see if our thoughts on how they went at that time have changed to now, or we'll have some ideas. But we're definitely going to do some more draft content and some more general NFL content as we go along. You guys, whoever tuned in, I don't know if some of the same people are watching this or not, but if you tuned in to our wrestling show last night, we talked about WrestleMania 1, had a lot of fun, despite the fact that I couldn't read my notes, which talk about the matches themselves. I could kind of make out who won really and most of the finishes, but I couldn't read what I wrote about the matches in between. So I'll make that better. And I noticed, I realized, and I don't think I did, but I don't think even I introduced ourselves last night before the wrestling show. I just kind of said it was the Meek Brothers show, and then just went on to the show without actually saying who we were. And when people find the video on YouTube, I'm like, who are these fools?
Yeah.
I don't know who they are. Our name is on the screen, but that doesn't really say much. So I don't think we put our Twitter handles on or anything.
No, I don't think I did.
Regardless, we're going to have some fun content up, both sports related and non-sports related. So keep an eye on that. Subscribe to the page on YouTube, Meek Brothers Entertainment, Meek Bros Entertainment. You can find us on Twitter, of course. My Twitter's on the screen there in front of you. Blake's at bmeek23. You can follow him if you're not following us already. And tune back in. We're going to talk about some more draft stuff and some more NFL stuff. We may even hit some other sports along the way. We're unfortunately Reds fans, so I don't know. There's a lot to talk about there, unless you just want us to complain for the next.
Oh, there's a lot to talk about, but it's nothing good.
Well, yeah, maybe that's a better way to say it. I believe they were losing 7-2 just a minute ago tonight.
Yeah, something like that. It was 5-0 when I quit watching.
Yeah, it's ugly. But football season is on its way. The next big step towards that is the NFL draft that starts tomorrow, plays out tomorrow, Friday and Saturday. And then we move on, and before you know it, it'll be time for mini camps and training camps and preseason, and then the regular season will be here. And that's always exciting for every fan base because the NFL uniquely, anything can really happen. And you just look no further than our favorite team to see how they went from picking first, then fifth, and then in the Super Bowl. So things can change quick, and it's always cool to watch and see how it plays out. But we'll be back with you again as far as this show goes next week, and we'll talk about the draft.
Yep.
Anything else you wanted to say before?
Yeah, check out I recorded my first episode of BSing with Blake before this one with Mr. Thomas Hunter. A lot of fun. We talked the NFL draft a little bit. We then decided to talk the MCU. So that was a lot of fun. Check it out. A lot of just talking about nonsense going to be happening on there.
There's nothing wrong with some good nonsense. I'll say.
It was fun. It was a good time. Other than that, just keep checking us out. We got a lot of stuff coming.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we will be back next week.
Have a good one.